Hey guys, Modern Day James here, and I'm back for another tutorial this week. I wanted to continue our discussion on perspective by tackling everybody's least favorite topic, ellipses. We'll start this week's lesson off by discussing the anatomy of an ellipse and some of its identifying features. Once we're a little more comfortable drawing these ellipses, we'll then try to apply it to a practical situation. We'll use ellipses in conjunction with the form building techniques from last week's lesson to create a vehicle sketch. This series is definitely meant to be watched in succession, so again, if you haven't watched the first two parts, please check them out.
So let's begin by trying to find our circle in an orthographic perspective. We'll use a square to find the proper proportions of our circle. Like we did in the second part of the series, we'll create an X from corner to corner to find the center point. And we know that our circle is going to be tangent to the center point of each side. When we turn this circle in perspective, we get an oblong shape known as an ellipse. The longer axis we define as the major axis, and then the smaller as the minor. Now that we've established these two things, we can try this in perspective. I begin by creating a square in 1-point perspective, finding the center point by once again creating an X from corner to corner, and then extending that center line back to the vanishing point. Now I can figure out my ellipse because I know it needs to be tangent to the center of each side. Using our mirroring techniques from the second video, I can copy this square back in perspective. Keeping in mind again that our ellipse needs to be tangent to the center point of each side of the square, we can find both the degree and the size of each ellipse. The degree of an ellipse is a measure of the angle of the line of sight as it intersects with the ellipse surface. The degree gets smaller as you get closer to the horizon line. An important feature about ellipses is that the minor axis is always in the direction of the vanishing point. The major axis will be perpendicular to this, but knowing its orientation won't really help us while drawing. Alright, so let's see how we can apply this to the scenario of creating a car. The most obvious circular elements we'll have to tackle will be the wheels. We begin by creating a vertical plane in perspective. Because of the orientation of the wheel, the minor axis will be heading back towards the left vanishing point. Here I'm ghosting over, estimating the degree of the ellipse till it seems appropriate. Once I've established this ellipse, I use the aforementioned mirroring techniques to duplicate this plane back in perspective. I typically separate the front and back wheels by 3 wheel lengths. The degree of this second wheel is going to be much shallower than that of the front wheel. We'll add some thickness to these wheels by creating another ellipse closer to the left vanishing point. To do this, I'm turning my vertical plane into a rectangular prism, and then finding the ellipse on the opposite face of the original. Connecting these two ellipses in perspective creates a cylinder, which will act as the primitive shape of our wheel. Now with the black pen, I'm separating out our tire from the working drawing. Now that we're a little bit more familiar with ellipses, and we know how to build tires, we can combine it with the form building techniques from last week in order to create a car. Alright, so let's try this out. I start by establishing our ground plane. Both of my vanishing points are off the page, so I'm estimating the convergences. This takes a lot of trial and error, so you'll become more comfortable with it the more you do it. This next curve is going to be a center cross section of our car. Try to imagine that we've just taken a vertical slice right through it. The lines heading towards the left vanishing point will help me gauge what my minor axis is going to be for this ellipse. I create the square around it, now having established the ellipse, and then copy it back in perspective. I'm trying to limit the number of marks that I make on the page, so I'm actually estimating the center point of each line. Then I draw an imaginary line from the corner that intersects that center point. I mess up this ellipse a little bit. It's kind of hard to draw without shifting the orientation of the paper. Now that we have our center line, I'm going to add width to create form. I start by bringing this vertical down to the ground plane, travel away from my left vanishing point, where I'll establish my width line. For the sake of the demo, I'm going to keep the width constant throughout, but you could also create a width curve, similar to the way we did the center line, to establish a nice dynamic shape. Anyway, I mirror the width over to the other side of the center line, and establish a vertical from the equal length on the opposite side. You'll see I keep establishing perpendicular cross sections by taking a vertical from the center line, traveling down to the ground plane, and then expanding it outwards to the width. If you're unfamiliar with this technique, definitely go back to the second part of this series. I go a little more in depth about building form. Once you've established these cross sections, you can connect their vertices to create your form. Notice that the curve furthest away from us actually crosses behind the center line. Now I'm expanding the flat plane of the wheel from the center line out towards the width. It's the same idea as earlier. Try not to get thrown off by all the construction lines that we have present. Once again, expanding that flat wheel shape out towards the width of the car. Now I'm going to create the wheel on the opposite side, away from us. We're drawing as if we have an X-ray view of the car, and we can see through it. I'm accenting the silhouette here. Notice that it follows the furthest curve until the center and front curves intersect it. We have that wheel plane, so now I'm just completing the curve of the wheel. These concentric ellipses are going to be the rim of the tire, and I expand the width of the wheel back towards the left vanishing point. You can do this type of drawing with a ballpoint pen so that the construction lines aren't as prominent, or you can do your construction drawing on a separate sheet of paper, or layer if you're working digitally. I did this a little out of order, but now I'm expanding that back tire towards the left vanishing point. Here I'm just adding the shadow. I'm hatching towards that left vanishing point.
Thanks for watching, guys. I really love making these videos for you every week. If you have any suggestions or anything that you'd like to see, please leave a comment below. I'll be posting new tutorials every Tuesday, so please be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell. Thanks, guys.